So the Commonwealth has been able to get in and surround these units that retreated back from Sidi El Barani, and they're all, through the combats, they've all ended up taking a step loss, except for this armored unit, which doesn't have a step loss. So if I can't get these guys back into supply this turn, they will all die, because each out of supply unit takes a step loss for attrition on that supply phase. So at least that's my understanding of the rules, is that supply, that attrition happens immediately. That it says in the 5.2, out of supply, the step loss occurs in the supply phase itself. So it's not one of those where, oh, you put a out of supply marker on it and then the next turn it takes an attrition. It looks like the attrition is immediate. So bad news for these guys if I can't either get Italian units into this hex or get them out of this hex. And right now they're going to be attacking both ways into this hex here. I think that's probably my best chance. I moved these guys down here in basically a futile effort to try and draw some of the firepower away from the coast here. But these guys could just get overrun, frankly, by these two stacks. Guess one advantage here is that from this hex into this hex, they'd be attacking up an escarpment, which I think makes them attack at 1/3 strength. The problem here was that I can only stack 4 guys in this hex to try and attack into there, and I can't attack from this hex into there, and I couldn't get these guys around into this hex because it's this cul-de-sac where this escarpment here prevents any movement from any of these 3 hexes. So kind of annoying there. Trying to get a relief force to help attack into this hex. So these escarpments are along the North African coast are notorious for creating these channels where you can't, where you can only hit from one particular location. So these guys picked a good hex to hold out in, and they were able to get supply through these guys. I was able to occupy that hex so I can get an unbroken chain of friendly units here to negate the Ezocs. Ezocs can only be negated by the presence of actual friendly units. They're not negated by Zocs. So, I couldn't have just a unit here and nobody in this hex and still get supply to these guys, because these Ezocs here would negate that. So got to have units in there to actually use as a supply chain. So the other thing I wanted to try and do with these guys was to get over here and potentially threaten Piccadilly Circus, the Commonwealth supply dump. Unfortunately, just not enough movement from starting up here near Bardia, or maybe they were in Halfaya Pass here, but regardless, they're moving through an Ezoc or to try and go around on the trail and then hook up with the minor road. Still just too many points, plus moving through Ezocs along here to use the road. They've got the road zocked off, so it's 2 movement points to move into an Ezoc. So these guys just didn't have, despite being armor, they just didn't have the movement to try and get over here and threaten the Commonwealth supply dump. So now in the process of, I think I've done all my movements at this point. Oh, did I bring in more supply? I think I brought it all into Bardia. Yeah. So I trucked 3 points of supply over to Bardia, which should be more than enough to supply all of the guys over here in Tobruk, because I had to use one of my Tobruk's port capacity is only 1 this turn, so I had to use that 1 port capacity to bring in a fresh unit for next turn. But I trucked the supply that I had in Tobruk over to Bardia, and 3 points should be more than enough. I think I've only got, if I can't get these guys into supply anyway, I've only got about 10 units total there, so they can all be supplied off of 1 point. Only drawback is I had to use my limited port capacity for Bardia and for Tobruk to bring relief units in from Tripoli, so I couldn't use that port capacity to bring in supply, which Kind of annoying, but the supply will have to come in next turn. If I do the short scenario Operation Compass is turn 4 to 6, and you have to destroy or push all of the Italians in east of the Mussolini line back across the Mussolini line by the end of those 3 turns, essentially. So I believe Rommel shows up on turn 6, but he'll show up in Tripoli, and I'm not going to have the movement points to move him over to relieve the Italians. If I wanted to keep playing, I would play all the way through to turn 28 on the turn track there. You can see him here on turn 5, which is January 41. But so if I wanted to do the whole scenario, I could play it all the way up to turn 28. But this is just sort of an intro for me to play and learn the system, so I doubt I will do the full Operation Compass scenario. I think I'll just do the short one. As you can see, I've only put the reinforcements on up to turn 6, which is the final turn on the short scenario, so this could be a quick series of videos. So I think having done all the movement and supply for the Italians, I'm ready to try and break these guys out and hit this armored unit. I don't believe there's this little tiny piece of terrain in here, but I think it's a wadi, and that has no effect on combat. Although really, and this is kind of a frequent problem with the gamers maps, is these little teeny bits of terrain, and you zoom in on it, these little teeny bits of terrain in the hex, sometimes color-wise it's hard to tell what it is. It's not some variant of hills, rough, or mountain terrain. It also doesn't appear to be salt marsh, so the only thing that I could figure that it is, and even here, I think, I don't know what it is, because I think these are wadi. In fact, it even says the Wadi Ash, Siaba. So, I don't know what this little piece of terrain here is, so I'm just going to ignore it and assume that this is a clear hex that these guys are in. So it looks like we've got 6, 9 points. That's 14, 17, 19, 21, 23. Alright, so we've got 23 to 9, which looks a lot like 3 to 1. And I've got artillery here, which can provide a column shift, which will make it 4 to 1. And I've got 2 allied air points, so I can kick in one of those to make it 5 to 1, because the Commonwealth already used their air points on their half of the turn. So that will allow me pretty decent odds to, and these guys have already all, I think, lost steps too, so this stack may end up getting destroyed depending on what I roll here. Ooh, a 10 on the 5 to 1. That's a D3 R4, so 1 step loss, 2 step loss, 3 step loss. They are all dead. Something for them to rebuild next turn, I guess. So that's kind of a blow, because that was most of the Allied armor. Now we can advance after combat, and these guys are going to move back out of Buck and into contact with their line. I don't think I have any attacks here that I want to manage with only a 3, 3 to 10, and 3 to a lot more would be bad. So these guys are probably going to get punched in the face on the next turn. So there we have the end of the combat phase, the exploitation phase, I believe. No, he's starting in an Ezok. So, or well, I think because he was an exploit capable unit, he could have actually advanced further after combat. And I think I want to do that because that will get him out of the way. Let me look at the advance after combat rules. Yeah, so first they have to go into the original hex, but then only exploitation can advance more than one hex. The stacking limit must be followed at the end of any advance. If the combat... My phone making noise. Let's see, the defender calculate advances his retreats. I thought you could move up to an advance after combat that you could move up to the number of hexes retreated. I'm not sure if that's under the retreat rules. Yeah, here. If the defender retreats further than one hex, only exploit-capable units can advance as many hexes as the defender's retreat result. Note that even if the defender expends step losses to cover part of his retreat result, the advance after combat is equal to the original result. So, and I assume that applies when the units are destroyed and no actual retreat is covered. I'm just going to assume it is, for right or wrong. So what I may do, because he can go an additional 3 hexes, but he can't cross these escarpments here, and I don't know that I can move through the Ezok. I was thinking, can I try and join up with my other exploit unit to the south there? 10.0A, if the combat destroys the defender, leaving an unfulfilled retreat result, the attacker can advance the retreat result's number of hexes. So that's good to know, what I was just speculating on there. Number of hexes, not movement points. Yeah, you can ignore Ezoks. So I think what I might do in that case is actually have this guy move down here just to shore that up a little bit. And then my units that moved, my armor, so it looks like my units up here in Bardia and Tobruk, because their exploit units can now move to the front. Even though they moved in the regular movement phase, they are not in an Ezok. So they can move up and join. Go to, so that would be like a half a movement point there along the main road. So that's half, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. I need to put something up south of the main road here in the coast, I think, to put a little threat onto... No, here's the question. I only had 3. I think I did my supply range for the axis wrong on my first turn, because I think I was doing it at a range of 5, and on turns 1 through 6, the axis only has a supply range of 3, which means these guys are all going to be out of supply. Unless I've got 1 truck left, so I guess I can truck a point down here to these guys. That's what I'm going to have to do. Should have done that on the movement phase, but we'll go back and correct it, given that I had plotted a fact, I think I forgot to do that because these guys would have been out of supply even at 5 movement points. Because right here, well, I guess this is, depending on how you count this main road here, 1, 2, 3. Now they would have been in supply using the secondary road, which can move. Oh wait, it's only half. Not. I was thinking it was a third, so that would actually be 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, those guys would have been too far away. So, using my last Axis truck, a little retcon here, and ship a point south to get in range of those guys. Leave 2 points up here in Bardia. So I want to calculate this out. That would be a half a point. 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5. No, 3.5. Oh, whoops. This guy was in Bardia. But he's actually going to go down here. He's going to move. I'll move him with the supply point. I don't want the Commonwealth forces jumping on it. So that was half point. 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. I can't even go 3.5. I can only go 3. So that puts them there. But that will put these guys now within supply range. And my other armor, the second med armor, and Tobruk can go 1, 2. It's basically 2 3/4, 3 3/4. 4 3/4, and leave them there along with the supply point. That'll set up a push maybe to get somebody back east. And this would be sort of a gamey thing here for this particular scenario, which is, I think, for the short scenario, if I don't get, where is it? Operation Compass. Short version, play turns 4 through 6. The Commonwealth wins if they destroy all Italian units fulfilling the Mussolini line requirements. Oh, and take Tobruk and Benghazi. There's no way I'm going to do that. Benghazi in 3 turns? Oh, that's crazy. I don't know how I would get to Benghazi short of just absolutely racing across the desert. Oh, there's no way the Commonwealth can win now. I would need to be more than halfway to Benghazi by now, by the end of the Commonwealth's second turn. Oh, that's crazy. Because Benghazi is all the way over there. So that I would just have to, I guess, have overrun. So I wasn't overrunning, I think, just to learn combat. I was doing real combat instead of overrunning. So what I would have needed to have done would have been to overrun those initial Italian units that were down here and just blast across the secondary road right here straight over to Benghazi with all of the Allied armor or something, because those guys could have done it. They were all 10 and 8 range movement point units, so they could have potentially done that, but it would have just had to have been with almost no contact, because overrunning is good, but it takes up a lot of movement points. So it's one thing, you can blow this unit out of the way, but you don't have a ton of movement left. But I would have had to totally exploit all of that to do the short scenario. So, moral of the story is read your scenario requirements for victory before you actually start playing. Which I think I read it, but I didn't pay any attention to it. I was more concerned about just trying to figure out the actual rules. So now we've learned that the Commonwealth has no chance of winning, but I do have a chance of just at least getting all these guys across the Mussolini line, but I'm not even going to make it to Tobruk. I mean, I don't have enough movement points to even do that. So, anyway, the Italians at least got their guys back in supply. So now for the supply phase, I think I can use this supply point for everybody. Because we've got... Well, that's right, though. The Italian brigades are worth 2. Instead of the usual 1 for purposes of calculating supply. So these guys are 1 each. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And 20, I've got another artillery over by Tobruk. So that's 20 is going to be, and it's every 10 points, so that's going to use 2 supply points. So let's spend those at the port because I can ship more in next turn. And we'll keep this one down here as our safety. Oh, crap, though. They're not close enough to use both of those. That's right, that was the whole reason why I moved points down south to begin with. So I got to use one of them up here for the close guys. And I got to use this one down here for the guys that are farther away. All right. Well, at least the supply is way the hell easier than OCS, which actually has combat supply, which is a whole other kettle of fish. So anyway, end of turn 5, the Axis have reestablished a defense along the Mussolini line. The Commonwealth already doomed to lose the short scenario, but let's see if I can obliterate the last of these units along the Mussolini line. So it all ended with a whimper. As expected, the Commonwealth forces pushed across the Mussolini line here, destroyed a nice little pile of Italian units in the process. The Italians counterattacked poorly and lost some more units. So it looks like they lost a total of 8 units to the dead pile. The Commonwealth only lost 3, but a couple of step losses in some of the attacks here. Did some exploitation attacks. So, as already discussed, obviously the Commonwealth doesn't win because I did not take both Tobruk and Benghazi. Again, to do that in 3 turns, you would have to be a master of the exploitation movement. And then, on top of that, I'm not... Now, the Allies have 4 trucks, but I'm not sure, given that they would have to capture Bardia at some point in there and ship supplies to Bardia, which they could then try and truck to the guys racing to Benghazi, because Benghazi is so far away. And, you know, these are secondary roads here, so they're only, you know, it's two hexes per movement point. You know, that's still way longer than 5 movement points. So you got to grab these ports here and ship to them, I guess. But just trying to do all of that in 3 turns seems crazy to me. But I guess I can sum up some thoughts on this system. So, Africa 2, and this was just sort of a quick hit, if you will, because I just did the short scenario of Operation Compass, which is mostly just fighting Italian units, as opposed to dealing with Rommel and the Germans. I enjoyed it. Compared, you know, I'm naturally going to compare it to the OCS because this is sort of this is OCS's easier cousin, and it's clearly intended to be a quick playing, much more beer and pretzels. Hey, you can have some drinks with this one. You're not slaving over supply charts and stuff like that. But, you know, you are going to be, still a Dean Essig design, you are going to be dealing with supply. As you can see, I've had my fair share of struggling with it, had to retcon one move in particular where I realized I had miscalculated the supply range restrictions that the Germans have compared to what the Commonwealth has on the first, 6 turns of the game. and this was turns 4 through 6, so we didn't start with turn 1, but within that range, the Axis has that 3 movement point restriction on their supply. So it turned out pretty well. Obviously, again, not reading the short scenario victory requirements. I thought I only had to kill everything east of the Mussolini line. I did not read the rest of the sentence where it said, oh, and also take Tobruk and Benghazi, which are, Benghazi's like 40 hexes away from, across all kinds of crazy terrain from where you're starting at the Mussolini line. So that was kind of screwed up. But I played enough. The 3 turns are enough, especially with as simple as this system is, as simple a sequence of play as it has, and as simple as the combat and movement are. The 3 turns went pretty quickly, and you get a good sense, even playing that short of a scenario, you get a good sense of how the game plays, how it functions. And what I came away with in terms of, what's the secret to the game, given how simple and simplified the combat is and the movement is. And for me, it has to be the exploitation phase. That, I think, is where you're going to win or lose the game, is in properly executing an exploitation and keeping those units that are doing the exploiting supplied. That would be, for me, just trying to imagine on the map the difficulty of getting exploitation units all the way to Benghazi in 3 turns is going to be sort of an exercise in maximizing exploitation movement efficiency. And then how do you supply those guys? I don't know, because the supply points that would follow them have to be on the trucks, and you have 4 trucks. And those trucks are going to be starting, basically for the Commonwealth, they're going to be starting in Alexandria, unless you take more ports outside of Mersa Matra. And Mersa Matra is either a 0 or a 1 port capacity, and to get that 1 port capacity, you have to roll a 5 or a 6 during the the port capacity determination phase for that port, which I never did in all 3 turns. I never got any port capacity in Mersa Matra, so you can't ship supply points to Mersa Matra. And the only ports then that the Commonwealth would have access to west of Alexandria are Bardia and Tobruk, and eventually Benghazi. So if you're not going to bolt across the desert straight for Benghazi, then you have to try and take Bardia, and Tobruk is one of the victory conditions, so that's a given. So I'm guessing you're expected to take Tobruk by the end of the 2nd turn, and Benghazi on the end of the 3rd turn, or the Commonwealth phase of the 3rd turn. Which means that the units heading for Benghazi will have to have been racing there from the 1st turn, because taking a detour to Tobruk will leave them with not enough movement points to get from Tobruk to Benghazi. It's just too far on too questionable a road if there's any enemies, especially if there's any enemies in the way that you would have to overrun. Now, they could make it on the main road. Say you had a 10 or a 12 movement point armor unit along the main road, that could make it from Tobruk to Benghazi in a turn or in a phase. But not if they have to overrun along the way. That's going to be an extra 4 points. So, it's I don't know. I'm not one of those min-max guys that would be able to figure that out easily. I'm sure it can be done, though. I'm sure people have done it. But that is, I think, the crux of the game is, how do you maximize that exploitation phase? Because the North Africa campaign especially is all about these big sweeping movements, and exploitation is a huge part of that, because as the rules said, properly managed, a unit can attack 3 times in a turn, which would be overrun, regular combat, exploit, overrun. So that's what you have to manage, but the was your enemy going to comply with that? That's the real question. So, yeah, I think aside from the exploitation, otherwise it's all a very cut and dry system. You're managing your error points for those column shifts, managing the your artillery for more column shifts, and so you can get the artillery and the air to work in your favor, especially if you can game your opponent out of their air points. To burn them when they don't really need to. The Axis starts with 2 air points. The Commonwealth only has 1. That will eventually, I think, shift in a different direction. But you can, there's more of these little type of gamey things. And then the other thing you can't plan for is your port capacity. Both sides kind of got screwed by bad port capacity rules. For Bardia, if the Axis can't drop supplies into Bardia, then they have to truck them from Tobruk, which uses up some of their trucks. So then they can't truck stuff from Benghazi or whatever if they need to, or truck stuff out of Bardia and further south or east of the Mussolini line. So I could see the supply conundrum, and especially the shipping supply conundrum, being a big factor of trying to, another one of the big puzzles to try and figure out in this game. So, overall, for my first experience with SCS, I enjoyed it. And I think I'm a big North Africa fan, and so I wanted to start with this one. I'm not sure if I'm even interested in other non-North Africa SCS titles. I might pick some up or look for some in the future. But for now, I think this is fine, and I think this would be a fun one to bust out at the club if we're, just on like a casual night where we didn't have anything specific planned. You could almost bust this out and just play through one of these short scenarios in just in a couple hours. So that's a really nice aspect of it. Like, you want to get the manage supply, manage air points and exploitation. You want to get that, a little bit of that puzzle solving, but not OCS level of calculations. Bust this out and play it in an evening. I think it would really work for that. So, it's the gamers. It's always going to be quality.